This is RDemocrat for Bluegrassrootsdotcom in our U-interview series. I'm here with my congressional candidate, Heather Ryan. I'm going to ask her a few questions. Thanks for being here today, Heather. And let's get to our first question. What have been the influence on your politics over the course of your life? Have you always been a Democrat, or was there some participating event that helped you see the light?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Bluegrass Roots for having me, and thank you, Richard, for doing this interview. The biggest thing the big turning point in my life for getting involved in politics was the nuclear threat, the nuclear proliferation in the 80s. It was a very big deal, and that's what the catalyst was that got me involved. Unfortunately, my parents were Republicans. They hadn't seen the light, so I did have to sway them from the dark side. It was very much like Star Wars, but I was able to do it. I am Luke Skywalker, and I was able to sway them from the dark side, and now they're diehard Democrats.
All right. Next, we all know that Ed Whitfield's a really well-funded candidate. The source of his funding could really be a weakness, but if you don't get the funding yourself to turn it into a weakness, it's kind of hard to exploit it. So the next question is, do you plan to compete with Ed Whitfield in money? And if so, how will you raise the money? And if not, how will you win?
Ed Whitfield doesn't just have $1.1 million. He has unlimited resources because he has Senator McConnell on his side. So I really can't compete with him financially. What I can compete with him on is grassroots campaigning. He never comes to the district, and when he does, of course, he just saturates it with special interest money. I have no interest in accepting corporate contributions the way he has. It sells out your soul to the devil, basically. He sells his vote for campaign contributions, and that doesn't interest me. That doesn't have a true representation of the people. So I can't compete with him financially. I don't expect to compete with him financially. I don't want to compete with him financially. I do hope that we get enough so that we can at least sprinkle the market with some television commercials, and hopefully there'll be powerful enough commercials to say, look, this man does not represent you. He represents big money. He represents special interests. He represents people with millions and millions of dollars. Those people aren't living in the 1st Congressional District. So I don't expect to, unfortunately, raise a ton of money like he has, but I expect to do very well with our grassroots support, and that's hopefully what's going to take us to victory.
Staying on that subject, are you getting any support right now from the party? And do you have a plan to win the support of the DCCC?
It was slow go at first. I wasn't sure exactly how the Democratic Party would embrace a non-traditional candidate such as myself. But now that the primary election's over, it's actually going very well. And the Democrats are seeing that, you know what, this isn't a flash in the pan. I really, truly am a candidate. I really do believe that the 1st Congressional District is worth fighting for, and I believe that I am the person that can do the fighting. So the D-Triple doesn't consider this a winnable race right now. I know that. I am a political scientist. I do understand the politics of this situation. But I think that eventually they'll come around, and they'll see that this is not only worth fighting for, but it's winnable.
This next question, what in your mind is Ed Whitfield's greatest failure as a congressman? And what do you consider would be his greatest achievement?
Ed Whitfield's greatest failure is that he's failed the people of Kentucky's 1st District. He got into office and he had a spectacular opportunity to really represent the people and bring their interests to Washington, D.C. and help bring about jobs, and not just jobs, but careers, higher tech, well-paying careers, not just jobs flipping burgers, not just doing service industry jobs. He has failed the people of Kentucky. He hasn't brought jobs. He hasn't brought health care. He hasn't brought any of the essential things that the people here need. He's failed the people of Kentucky. So his greatest achievement, he added on the word national to the Quilt Museum. Does that count? It sure does smell like marshmallow fluff to me. So, it's hard for me to choose his greatest achievement when there's so many things that he could have done.
What course do you believe that America should take in the fight against international terrorism? And what would you do different than Ed Whitfield to bring this confrontation to a successful conclusion?
Well, the war on terror really doesn't have anything to do with Iraq, and it never did. That's something that the Bush administration put into our conscious when they said that they were building weapons of mass destruction. So the very first thing we need to do is withdraw our troops from Iraq, and that will help with the war on terrorism because we'll have more resources for which to fight the war on terrorism. You know, there's so many problems with being in Iraq and invading a sovereign nation so that we can have better oil interest. There are so many things that went wrong in this war on terrorism that it's hard to say where to begin. The first place that we have to begin is withdrawing responsibly, and we need to start withdrawing responsibly soon, fast, as soon as we change hands and George Bush is no longer the mistaken chief. So that's the first thing I'll do, is we need to start withdrawing as soon as possible out of Iraq, and then we can really start putting our resources toward the real war on terrorism.
Well, Heather, as you know, we haven't really put up much of a fight for this seat in the last several election cycles, and that's mainly because most Democrats nationwide don't think this seat is winnable. What would you say to those that tell you that this seat's not winnable?
Well, actually, anybody that says this seat isn't winnable, they just don't know me. They don't know that I'm not going to give up, that I am a fighter. I've been a fighter all my life, and that this seat is not only winnable, but it's worth fighting for. We did not lose this seat to a Republican until 13 years ago. It has always been a Democratic seat, and now is the time to return it to a Democratic seat. If I'm the person that is willing to stand up and fight for it, then so be it. But the people that say it's not winnable are probably people that are just afraid that, you know what, it might just be winnable. So I'm not afraid to stand up and say it's worth fighting for, and it is winnable.
Let's just say that your campaign is successful and you do win this seat. When you get to Washington early next year, what's going to be the first legislation that you want to work on?
The first piece of legislation that I'd personally want to work on, if I don't introduce it myself, I'd like to sponsor or support a piece of legislation that guarantees health care for every single American. This is so essential to our quality and standard of life. We are the only industrialized nation who does not care about the health of our citizens. It's disgraceful. I don't have health insurance. My husband doesn't have health insurance, and he has diabetes. So every time we get sick, we have to travel to the Veterans Facility, which is 65 miles one way. That's disgraceful, and we're fortunate to have that health coverage by the Veterans Facility. But it's not that fortunate that we have to travel so far. So there's so many problems that are vexing this nation, but first and foremost, we have to make sure that our population is healthy. Of course, that's in addition to taking the people, or our troops, out of Iraq. But the first piece of legislation, of course, is making sure that we guarantee health care for all of our citizens.
This last question, the other night I did a search on YouTube with your name, and a video from KYGOP came up calling you crazy Democrat Heather Ryan. I was wondering, do you want to respond to that?
Actually, I think that's funny because I actually saw that myself, crazy Democrat Heather Ryan, and they were calling me crazy because I was responding to Ed Whitfield's single piece of legislation that makes a ban on eating horse meat, which to me is crazy. So the fact that the Republicans are saying I'm crazy for talking about horse meat when it was their piece of legislation is asinine. So, you know what, I've been called a lot of things. Crazy's not the worst. I'm sure it won't be in this election the worst thing. If nothing else, crazy is a lot better than what I expect them to call me. And, you know, at least they'll never call me boring, and they'll never say that this race wasn't exciting.
Well, I hope everybody's enjoyed hearing Heather Ryan's take on this race. We really need your support here in Kentucky's 1st District. We've got a great candidate. We've got a horrible opponent. If we get the resources we need, we're going to win this race. So please go to www.ryanforkentucky.com and support us in Kentucky's 1st District. Thank you.